Hi everyone, so after a bit of a hiatus we're going to get back to doing some Napoleonic games. I'm going to play a series of 3 from this General to Brigade scenario book, Napoleonic Scenario 6, Imperial Sunset. And there's 3 scenarios on the Battle of Lutzen: an initial attack by the Prussians, a riposte by Napoleon's Guard, and then a final scenario. So that'll be the plan for the next few weeks. Hopefully things at work will stay a little bit calmer than they have been over the last 2 or 3, and we'll be able to carry these out successfully, but hopefully today we'll get at least the first game filmed. So we are going to be playing these with the General d'Armée rules, but using this as the scenario book. Alright, I'll come back with some details of this first scenario. Okay, so the scenario today represents the opening of the Battle of Lutzen, where Blücher and his Prussians repeatedly attacked the villages of Groß-Gorschen, Klein-Gorschen, Rana and Kaya. These villages were held by elements of Souham's division from Ney's Third Corps, who struggled to hold the line while awaiting for further reinforcements. So we'll see what happens when those reinforcements arrive, but the first test will be, can they hold the villages? So on the table you'll see that we've got 4 villages. We've got Groß-Gorschen here in the centre. Then we've got Klein-Gorschen, which is over on the right here, next to this, next to the river, the stream. Then we've got Kaya, slightly to the rear, there in the centre. And then over on the left flank, we've got Rana. So as we can see, we've got the French already deployed on the table, and the Prussians will advance on and will take a couple of turns of closing fire as they move up into position. So we've got 1 French brigade here, 4 battalions. As you can see, I've got some coloured beads next to these. These are to remind me of the status of the morale of these troops. I've had a couple of really good suggestions of some other markers to make, perhaps with different coloured flock to do this, which I may get to in due course, but still too busy painting figures to get round to that at the moment, so I'm afraid it's still coloured beads this time. So the yellow beads here are second line troops, so they will fight as standard troops until they take 4 casualties, and then they'll default back to conscript status. So this first brigade here has got 4 battalions, 1 in the village, 2 in support and 1 in the rear. We've got the core heavy artillery battery there, so we've got a battery of 12 pounders, and we've got Souham himself as our divisional commander. Down here we've got elements of the 2nd Brigade, so 2 battalions here, again of conscripts. And then in the village we've got 1 of line, sorry, those ones are of 2nd rate troops, same as the first set I described. Here we have 1 of line grade, but they're supported by a battalion of conscripts. So that's the end of our 1st division of 8 battalions. Then we've got more of Ney's Corps here. So we've got a 2nd division. So we've got the artillery battery, actually that's attached to this brigade. And then we've got another garrison in this village, 2 more battalions in reserve, and a battalion in support of the garrison of the village. And then the final artillery battery for the 2nd division in Ney's Corps, with 2 more battalions here and 2 in reserve. Again, these are all 2nd rate battalions. So as we can see, the French army, as was the case at Lutzen and in the 1813 campaign, a lot of newly raised units or provisional units that were thrown together and trained on the march to the battlefields in Germany. So we'll see how they do. They're supported by 2 regiments of hussars. One of these should be the Baden troops from Baden, but I don't actually have any of those, so we've gone for 2 French hussar regiments rather than 1 French hussar and 1 troop of Baden light. The Baden cavalry performed astoundingly well at Lutzen and are graded as elite for this game, so the smaller of those 2 cavalry regiments will be graded as elite. So that's the initial deployment. I'll come back after we've done the opening or the closing fire from the French artillery as the Prussian troops move on table for the start of the first term of actual combat. See you all in a sec. Okay, so we've deployed and the Prussians have done their approach marches. The French have done their battery fire, as have the Prussian and Russian supporting artillery batteries that are supporting Blücher's forces here. This brigade down here has got infantry assault off and has taken no casualties as an approaching this village on the French right flank, Prussian left. And the Prussians have heavily weighted their infantry assault to the left flank. We've got this Prussian brigade here in the centre. It's taken 4 casualties on that right-hand battalion from the French heavy artillery on the hill. But the Prussian counter-battery fire has caused one of the French battalions, there was one in line between this one and the village, that took 4 casualties, failed its discipline and has retreated off table. So first success for the French. As we move across, we've got the most elite Prussian brigade here. It also has infantry assault orders in place and has taken a couple of casualties from the French artillery battery here, but the French artillery fire in the centre did not prove particularly effective, and the second divisional battery here was opening fire against the Prussian cavalry, which is out on the far right Prussian flank, and has caused some casualties against them. So that's the end of the pre-game movement, and that's the deployment. So as you can see, Prussian infantry heavily weighted to the left, then a gap, and then we have some Prussian cavalry on the right, try and pin some of the French forces over here. But the Prussians have used the benefit of being the attacking force to decide their point of attack, and they're going to try and break through this gap in the centre, capture this village, swing across to capture the second village there, and take the one on the far left. So let's see how we do. We'll roll for ADCs in the first turn. Both sides get 5 ADCs, 1 for each brigade and a bonus one. So let's see how we've done for this first roll. So not great for the Prussians. They only have 1. Let's knock that one over. That was on a 2. 1 ADC for the Prussians on that 6. No, not great for the French either. They've only got 3 ADCs. So we'll now roll for activations and come back with the initiative roll. Okay, so pretty good activations. All the Prussian brigades, despite only having 1 ADC, and they put their re-roll on this brigade in the centre to try and make sure they could get this assault in against the village. All the Prussian brigades, including the cavalry, went active. All the Prussian artillery limbered up last turn, so didn't fire, and will be moving up and support onto the table after the Prussians move. And for the French, all their brigades are active, and they managed to get infantry assault off on the battery in the centre. So let's roll for initiative now. No sides get a bonus because everything's active. And the Prussians get initiative as befitting the attacking force. So they get a 7, so they will get to move and potentially assault first. Okay, so we're at the end of proper turn 1 movement, and we've seen advances by the Prussians across the line and some rejigging of the French position. So let's go through what we've actually seen happen. So over here on the far right flank, the Prussians have gone aggressive and have launched their assault into this farm. They're leading with one of their veteran musketeer battalions of this regiment, and their skirmish screen and other battalions are pushing forward against the French on the right. The French have moved forward this second line infantry battalion to provide support to the unit to its front. Over here, as we move across the hill, you can see that the gap that was there in the French line has closed a bit. We've edged the French line battalion across to its left and brought another French battalion up, so it is providing support to that. The artillery can fire because they're over the hill, so they'll be able to fire some shots against these approaching Prussians. And the French cavalry has also moved forward off the back line to at least potentially threaten or provide some cover for this gap in the centre. As I mentioned, this Prussian brigade has pushed forward, and indeed some Prussian artillery has now appeared on table, moving from its pre-deployed positions to provide some closer fire support to their assaults. And while over here on the right flank, the Prussians have also assaulted into this village in the centre. Both French villages opened fire and caused 1 or 2 casualties against the attacking French columns, Prussian columns, but not enough to cause them to hesitate. So that's it for movement on the right flank. If we move across to the left, not much movement going on this side. Simply the Prussian cavalry has moved forward to threaten the French artillery in the centre. You might be able to see over on the far right hand side, just in front of that plastic box, some pennants in the woods. So we've got the other Prussian cavalry regiment looking to do an outflanking move around the edge of those woods. So that's it for movement in this first turn. And we'll start with firing. Prussians go first. Okay, we'll start with the Prussian skirmish screen. They get normally 3 dice for 4 bases. That's reduced to 2 because they're firing at French skirmishers. But the French skirmishers may not be 3 inches in advance. So they don't provide an effective skirmish screen. So we will get 3 shots and simply the first casualty taken against the skirmishers, and the others, if there are any, will go against that French line battalion to their rear. What do we roll? A 3, a 3 and a 4. We need a 5 or 6 for skirmisher fire, so no casualties from that Prussian skirmish screen. As we move across, these French columns aren't going to fire. We've got 2 more Prussian skirmish screens here. 3 to 4 bases, again get 3 shots. So the skirmish screen on the right here will open fire against this French battalion, causes no casualties, and the skirmish screen at the left will go against that French line and causes 1 casualty. And then the Prussian skirmish screen over there will fire against the building. You lose 2 dice. Oh no, against that French skirmish screen there in front of the building. That'll just be 2 dice, and we cause 1 more casualty against that French skirmish screen outside that village. Otherwise, no firing from the Prussian columns. And we've got another Prussian skirmish screen. They're going to have a go against the French guns. There'll be 3 shots. And they cause, unfortunately, no casualties for the Prussians. And then finally, we've got the long distance artillery fire from the Russian heavy battery. That will choose to fire. It's been firing at the centre, so it will fire at what's an unscreened target. It'll fire at this artillery battery at the centre with some bounce through. So what do we get? We roll a 6. That'll be half a casualty. That does not convert, and the bounce through does not convert either. So not great effect from the Prussian firing. That's it, and we'll now see how the French respond. Okay, so the French skirmishers had no effect here. This village has already fired in the face of that tanking Prussian column coming in. So it'll now be a chance for this French line battalion to fire. So they are second line, second-rate troops. So they've only taken 1 casualty, so they will still fire at full effect. But they did move. So this will be an inferior volley. And it'll be at -2 because they're firing at skirmishers. They're all an 8. So an inferior volley goes down to a 6. This is 1 casualty against that Prussian skirmish screen that it's facing. All right, then the Prussian skirmishers by the village will fire at the French skirmishers. That'll be 2 dice. Nothing, no effect from them. The French garrison has fired. The French foot artillery, who have got artillery assault, will fire against that green flagged Prussian unit that are opposing them. They will get 2 artillery dice. This will be at long range still. I will just check that. That looks like long range to me. They roll a 10. That's pretty good. That'll be 2 casualties in a discipline test, but no bonus from the artillery dice. So we'll just check the range, make sure that is 2 casualties, and then I'll roll the discipline test now, see what it does. A 5. They go unformed. I'll mark the casualties up, and we'll just check that range, make sure that's all correct. Okay, so having checked the range, that's actually 19 inches to this unit, so we would have caused 1 extra casualty. We would also have an extra artillery dice because we're firing at effective range against a targeting column. I rolled that only rolled a 2, so that caused no further casualty. That took that unit up to 3, which is casualties this turn. 4 cumulative casualties, so that'll be at -1. They rolled a 5, that goes down to a 4, so the result stays the same. They are unformed, but they have taken 4 casualties now. All right, and we'll now fire this French skirmish screen against the Prussian skirmishers that are opposite. A 1 and a 4, that's nothing. We will roll a shot for this artillery battery. This is at effective range, firing at the cavalry that's opposite. That's a 10, and that will be good. That's 3 casualties, as we know, and a discipline test on these cavalry. That takes the cavalry up to 6. A discipline test will be at -1. They take an 8, that will be fine. They'll also take some shots from this garrison. That'll be 3 shots. Needing 5s or 6s, that's another casualty. Takes them up to 7. Taking quite a lot of casualties now, and that will be it. The French skirmishers here, we can fire perhaps 1 shot, I will say, at the Prussian cavalry in the trees. Roll again, no effect. Skirmishers can't usually fire at cavalry, but cavalry in cover they can, or if they're firing from cover they can. If they're in the open, they can't. Back in a second. Right, with all the firing complete, we'll now do all sorts on the village. So the French get 5 dice, as they've taken no casualties yet in the village. Prussians start with 5. They've taken... how many casualties? They've only taken 2 casualties, so they don't lose anything for their casualties. They lose 1 for attacking a village, but they are a morale grade higher. They are veterans. So this will be a straight roll-off. Should be 5 dice each. I think I've just picked up 6 for the French. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see how we do. Okay, so Prussians cause 2 casualties. French cause 2 casualties. That's a tie. We have an option for the French to withdraw or fight another round of combat. Right, the French are going to stay in the fight. They've only taken 2 casualties, so they will be still rolling 5 dice. The Prussians have taken 4 casualties now, so they drop a dice, so they're down from 5 to 4. You don't lose the penalty for attacking a village in the second round, so they don't take an extra -1 for that, and they gain 1 for their veteran status, so they go back up to 5. The supporting Prussian battalion is only line, so it will simply get 5 dice, and the supporting French battalion is also line. So again, it's another really close combat. It'll be a straight roll-off. And let's see what we've got. So Prussians have caused 2, 4, 5 casualties, exactly average. It looks like the French might have thrown them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, by 1. No, by 2. 7 casualties for the French. So the French win by 2. And I'm sure the Prussians will recoil from the village and will put the casualties on the unit. Right, so moving on to the second combat, we've got another Prussian brigade going into this village in the centre. So the Prussians have just been thrown back from that village on the French right. Let's see if they can do any better in the centre. Pretty similar, we've got a veteran battalion going in, but the French have got the advantage of defending the village. So Prussians roll horrendously. They only cause 1 French casualty, although the French only cause 2, and then on difference of 1 we fight on for a second round. The Prussians will continue to commit. I think the French will too as well. Let's see how the second round goes. Okay, so we've got slightly better chances here. So we've got French line and conscripts fighting veterans and elites for the Prussians. So hopefully the Prussians will take this one if you're a Prussian supporter. Let's see. French doing well. First 3 were all hits. Tremendous rolls from the French. I do have 2 more dice to roll for the Prussians. So the French, and that's evened out. Lots of 6s, but just 5 casualties for the French. So far for the Prussians, they have done well. 4, 5, 6, 7, and they get 2 more dice. Let's see if we can cause any more. No, no more casualties. 7. So the Prussians win by 2 this time. So the French are thrown out. The French retreat. And the Prussians have taken this village in the centre. Right, so here we are at the end of a pretty dramatic first turn. So the French right flank is holding strong. The Prussians have been thrown back from their assault on this village. It was a close run thing, 50-50, but the French managed to hang in there. And there'll be a full to test on that Prussian brigade this turn. In the centre, the Prussians have moved up, and the French have responded by strengthening their line. But over here in this village in the centre, the Prussians have ejected the French force, and this French brigade is itself going to have to take a full to test as 2 battalions of this brigade are retreating. Some interesting challenges, and we'll need to redeploy some of these French forces from the left flank to reinforce the centre if we're going to hold off this Prussian assault. All right, on we go with the second turn. Right, now let's kick off activations in this second turn. So the Prussians did well. They rolled 5 active ADCs. They've allocated 2, so including a re-roll on this faltering brigade. We've allocated 3 to this brigade in the centre to put infantry assault on it, and we're going for luck on the other 2 battalions. So let's come back and do the faltering brigade last, as that will be the most tense. Let's do this brigade in the centre. Let's see if they activate. They need their re-roll. They go hesitant in the centre. That's not good. The brigade that has captured the village is active. The cavalry brigade is active. So let's see how we do on this falter test. See if we can get some luck for the Prussians. Rolling for the faltering brigade. We do have a re-roll. Re-roll a 2. That is not a good result. Re-roll again. A 1. Oh no, this is a tragedy for the Prussians this early in the game. It's a savoir keeper, and that Prussian brigade is going to depart from the table. Not great for the Prussians. Right, so the French have got 4 ADCs. We're going to put artillery assault, or try to, on this brigade, drive off this cavalry and allow us the flank. But that's hesitant, so we don't get a reroll. So that brigade is inactive. This brigade in the village is hesitant. That's not good. And then the brigade on the right is hesitant. All 3 French brigades are so far hesitant. Lots of 1s and 2. And now we've got our 2 Fulter tests. Right, let's see how we do. 2, not great for the French, and a 1. It's an exact mirror. The French brigade in the centre also flees. All right, real turnaround in this game. Let's see what's going to happen next. We'll remove the fleeing troops and mark up the hesitant brigades. So quick recap on those ADC rolls. It's fairly dramatic. So every single French brigade on the table has gone hesitant. I didn't roll the cavalry on camera. I forgot to roll for them, but just roll for them as well. They got a 1. So they are hesitant. So every French brigade is hesitant. For the Prussians, however, the opportunity to exploit in the centre is restricted, as their central brigade has gone hesitant, and they've lost one of their attacking brigades, which is a blow, as their units are better quality than the French. So although a fair exchange in terms of numbers, not in terms of troop quality. Prussians again have probably will have initiative. They will be testing at +3 because of the number of hesitant French brigades. So French get a 7, -3 goes down to a 4. Prussians get a 5, so the Prussians do have initiative as we start this second time. Okay, so somewhat bravely, the Prussian Lancers have decided to charge the French formations here. So we'll get some defensive fire. First, we'll fire the artillery battery. That rolls a 6, could be better for the French. A 6 at close range is 2 casualties on the attacking cavalry. All right, and then we'll do the defensive volley, and we'll see whether we get some passing fire from the garrison. Right, rolling for passing fire from the garrison. No casualties for that. And then this French battalion here is a... It's got no counter against it. I think they might be lying. Anyway, we roll. Wow, a 12. That will do them good. Whether that's a steady or a superior volley, that's 4 casualties at least, and a discipline test on the charging cavalry. So that takes the cavalry up to 6 casualties this turn as they try and charge in, and they'll take a discipline test. They pass. They've rolled an 11. All right, let's do the charge results. So this is a test at -2 on the Prussians. So even though they took 7 casualties charging in, the fact that they're a large unit, and the fact that they are lancers charging infantry in line. All right, they roll a 9 versus a 9, so that looks like a draw. So that'll be -2 on the charge results. Cavalry versus infantry. Cavalry take 1 more casualty and retire, and the defenders stand. So the lancers are thrown back by the strength of the fire from that artillery battery and that French line. All right, so some various bits of skirmisher fire. This skirmish line here opened fire against this French battalion, did actually cause 3 casualties, took 1 in return from some firing from the garrison. Over here, the French artillery battery took 4 casualties actually from this Prussian skirmisher screen here, the Prussian skirmisher screen here, and some fire from the garrison now that the Prussians control it. Return fire by the artillery and the French skirmisher screen here weren't effective, and all the French guns over here had fired in response to the charge. So very much a turn of units trying to sort themselves out, and we'll move on to turn 3. Okay, with the slightly better ADCD rolls, the Prussians managed to get infantry assault off on this brigade in the centre that they've been trying to do for a couple of turns, and activated all their brigades, as did the French. And the French have initiative this turn. Perhaps they're starting to turn the tide of this battle. Let's see what the French do as they get charges, then movement in turn 3. So with initiative, the French don't like the look of all this heavy artillery for the Prussians that's just forming up here, so they're looking to do a spoiling attack or to try and break through this formation. So they're going in with their veteran, or elite rather, Baden Hussars against this Prussian column. They'll also look to overrun this Prussian skirmish screen with their supporting unit. So the Baden Hussars charge in. Okay, so first choice for the Prussians is whether to try and form square or not. If they don't form square, if they fail to form square, and they've only got a 50-50 chance from a charge from this range, they could be in trouble. And the column is not a bad defensive formation, so we're going to do a defensive volley and we're going to stay in column. So Prussian defensive volley, wow, that's pretty good. That's a 10. This will be a standard volley, but it will be at half effect. So that's 2 casualties and a discipline test on the Baden Hussars. They pass their test, but there will be 2 casualties on the charge result. And rolling a 6, we have a destiny test. I think we forgot to do one of these earlier. We've rolled a 5, which means we can recover a casualty. That unit has no casualties, so that will be no effect. Now let's do the charge results as the Baden Hussars. Okay, so despite the charges being elite, the fact that the Prussians are in column and inflicted 2 casualties means this test will be at +1 to the Prussians. Let's see how we do. We roll a 9 and a 12. Prussians do have support, so they are going to have a go at re-rolling that 3. No good, 2. So we'll have to check to see whether you get a destiny test on rolling a 6 on a charge result. I don't think you do. But the Cavalry have won by 4. Cavalry versus Infantry. They will melee with a LAN, and the column goes unformed. We'll see how the Cavalry do as they charge. I always find supports and charges slightly challenging in the rules. So we've definitely got a close to a LAN. I've just been checking what I do with my support. So supports move up. They had the benefits of the rerolls. We took the rerolls in the charge. And then if they are in support distance and there is a supporting unit that's in charge range, you also charge that support unit. Well, we can't charge because the supporting unit is this one back here, and in the checkerboard formation this one will not be a support because there's more than a 3-inch gap there, so these guys cannot charge that unit. They are in support of this one, so we simply have 1 assault here. I think I've got that right. So we'll move on and in due course do the melee result. So in the rest of the movement this turn, so the French are thinking about doing a flanking attack from the right here. So this brigade has moved out into march column. The forward battalion has moved out of the village, and one at the rear has moved in to occupy the village. Prussians are pretty much pinned here because of the charges. The Prussians have moved up their last infantry battalion into the shelter of the buildings here because it was taking a lot of fire from the French artillery here. But the French artillery decided to voluntarily withdraw. It had taken 6 casualties. It takes 1 more casualty to voluntarily withdraw. That would take it up to 7. So it's pulled back off the table. It would only take 2 more casualties from these skirmishers in the garrison to have caused that unit, that artillery, to break, and that would have called a full to test on another French brigade. So rather than losing the artillery and doing the full to test, noting we've got another undamaged battery, or pretty much undamaged battery over here, we've pulled that one out of the line. Alright, so that's it for movement this turn. A little bit of skirmisher firing down here, and that'll probably be it for the turn. Let's start. So French opening fire first, so this French skirmisher screen will go at the Prussians and does no casualties. This garrison will open up against the French Prussian skirmisher screen and does 1 casualty on them. And nothing else over here will fire for the French. And then the French skirmisher screen over here will have a go against those Prussian guns. See if it's in range. Should be 3 dice. Does 1 casualty against that Prussian battery. That's it for French firing. Back with the Prussians. Oh no, we got this French battery here. Now most of those Prussian units I think are masked by the French cavalry that's gone in. So we will fire the guns against the town. See if we can do anything. It'll be half effect and at -1. We roll a 9. At long range, half effect will be half a casualty. Yeah, so no impact on that. That's it for French. Okay, so just before we move on to melee, I didn't mention the French brigade down here that's holding this village has also started to reposition to potentially counterattack towards this village in the centre. All right, let's see how the French charge goes as they try and break these Prussian columns. So the French should have a good chance here. They gain 1 for Erlan. The Prussians lose 1 for being unformed, and we are 2 morale grades higher. So we got twice as many dice for the French, and indeed this looks like a good result. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 casualties for the French, none for the Prussians. They will destroy that Prussian infantry battalion. Okay, so another swing. Prussians only had 2 ADCs, and they failed to put artillery assault on their battery that's in front of the Baden cavalry. And all their brigades went hesitant. For the French, all brigades are active. So this is -3 on the French, on the Prussian die roll. So the Prussians get a 2, the French get a 7. 7 means the French have initiative. I think some more charges are going to go. Could be the decisive moment of the game, although I think the French have got a tough ask here to break this whole brigade just with 2 regiments of cavalry. So the Baden light cavalry has charged again, has indeed their French hussar colleagues. Let's see what we do as we get some defensive fire from the Prussians. Okay, opening up with the Prussian artillery battery. This will be at close range. And we roll a 6. Not a great result for the artillery. A 6 is 2 more casualties on the Baden Hussars. Remember 2 for the charge result. All right, and then we've got the French column. Prussian column will open fire. This will be at half effect. Oh, well, we've done it again. We've rolled another double 6. So a standard volley is 2 casualties and a discipline test on those hussars who go unformed. It'll be a tough ask for these hussars to charge in. All right, I think you can allocate supports to gun batteries. I will check that offline, but if we can, we're going to allocate that Prussian battalion to support the gun battery. Otherwise, it'll allocate its support to that infantry battalion there. All right, let's see what the modifiers are and roll for the Baden's charge. Just check the support rules. So artillery cannot provide support, not relevant in this case because it is itself being charged, and you can only support your own type. So cavalry cannot support artillery or infantry, and they're defined as 2 different types. So therefore, I assume infantry cannot support artillery, only units of its own type. So it can provide defensive fire if appropriate, but that would be it. So no supports here for the Prussian artillery. All right, back with the roll. Okay, so this will be a +1 roll for the hussars. See how they do. They will be thrown back. They recoiled under that level of artillery fire. That's a -6. So they actually retreat and take 1d3 casualties. So 1d3 casualties on the hussars. That'll be 2 more casualties on the hussars. They pull back. Okay, and in the second charge, this will also be +2 to the Prussians, as they're in column, and their benefit also for causing 2 casualties on the French, although the Prussians do have more casualties themselves. All right, so at -2 on the French takes the French down to a 7, so the Prussians have won by 1. So cavalry versus infantry, 0 to -1. The cavalry takes 1 casualty, and they retire. So the French have been thrown. With both those charges being failed, we took a risk to general test, given that we had the retreat results, and we've rolled a double 1. So that will be a falter test, I think. Dishonour. Opposing brigadier is thrown from his horse and flees. Your brigade falters. So this French cavalry brigade falters. That could be a turn up for the books. All right, doing a recap. Here we are at the end of turn 4. So this French brigade on the left flank is pretty much staying where it is. No real threats. It's got that unit of Prussian lancers on the other side of the river, but it's formed square with its 1 battalion here that could potentially be charged, and they can't charge into the village with the garrison in there. So they're effectively pinned, but that unit's not large enough for the Prussians really to want to move it. That's allowed the French to redeploy this artillery battery to potentially bring some fire down on the flank of the Prussian position. The French are still firmly in control of this village here. There's some skirmish fire going on as the Prussian skirmishers put some pressure on the French lines here. The French have moved this brigade forward to try and recapture the village in the centre, but the Prussians are also starting to move out with their elite brigade there to see if they can contest and potentially break this French brigade and give them access to this village. The French cavalry has been thrown back, which is probably why the Prussians are feeling a little bit more active in the centre. The Prussian artillery is now unmasked and able to open fire on the French units, which we will do next turn, and 1 infantry battalion of the Prussians that was in the centre has moved across to potentially threaten this village, while the French brigade starts its outflanking move against the artillery position. So I don't know, it still feels heavily stacked in favour of the French, but does depend really on the success of this potential attack in the centre from this Prussian brigade as it tries to drive towards this second village. All right, we'll be back with turn 5. All right, let's resume at turn 5. So let's roll for ADCs. Both sides only have 4 dice now, as both have lost a brigade, and see how we do. All right, and some double sixes. That gives you a bonus ADC, and we actually have a bonus ADC here for both the Prussians and the French. All right, let's see where we're going to allocate. Great for the Prussians. We had lots of re-rolls. We put artillery assault on this brigade in the centre, and we rolled a 1 and a 2, and then we went to re-roll the attacking brigade here, and we rolled 2 1s. So the Prussian brigades are all hesitant. For the French, their brigades all the way along the line are active, but we do have a fault test on the cavalry brigade for the loss of the cavalry commander. Well, that's not great. No. So perhaps there is some life in it left for the Prussians. The French cavalry brigade withdraws at this point in the game. So the advancing French brigade here has started to deploy into line to use its firepower to try and reduce the effectiveness of these Prussian columns. Didn't fancy charging them, as we know they're the best units in the Prussian army. Over on the right flank we can see the French right hook starting to come into place. The Prussians continue to redeploy. They've swung their artillery battery around to try and provide some firepower to resist this attack, but haven't been able to advance any closer to this village because of their hesitant status. All right, French to fire first as we start the firing in turn 5. We'll start with this artillery battery on the hill. It's going to open fire against that Prussian column out in the open. We roll a 6. That won't be too much. Half a casualty, I think. At long range, we do cause 1 casualty. We'll mark that time. The French skirmishers have fired at the Prussian skirmishers, caused a casualty, and the garrison of the village will open fire and cause 2 casualties on this attacking Prussian battalion, taking it up to 6. That one's starting to suffer a bit now. All right, over here, the French deployed into line, so this will be an inferior volley. They roll a 9 going against the skirmishers. That will go down to a 7. So an inferior volley with a 7 is 1 casualty against the French skirmishers. Right, we'll put a casualty marker, on the Prussian skirmishers. We'll put that marker on them in a second, and then we'll fire our Prussian skirmish screen. We cause 1 more casualty on the Prussian skirmishers facing off against them in the village, and then the French garrison will also open fire against the end of that skirmish screen, and they cause 1 more casualty. That'll be the loss of 1 Prussian base. And we'll use that casualty marker on them. Right, I think that's it. The French artillery battery here, don't think has got any viable targets, so that just remains in reserve. Probably need to think about redeploying that, and we'll do some return fire from the Prussians. So again, Prussian skirmish screen does nothing. The Prussian skirmishers against this deploying French infantry battalion does nothing. The garrison of the village firing against the deploying screen does 1 casualty on the French here. And then we've got the Prussian artillery. So we'll open up with our heavy battery at long range against the French battery on the hill. A 7, that'll be down to a 5, which might be half a casualty. It doesn't do anything of any effect. We'll fire our skirmishers against the French skirmisher screen, and we will cause 1 casualty on the French skirmisher screen in the distance. Mark that up, and then we'll fire at effective range. I will just check that to make sure it's not close, but we'll fire our battery here against that French column. We'll get an extra casualty dice for firing at a column at effective range, but it'll be at -2 because we moved. So that'll be down to a 4 with 1 bonus casualty. So at effective range, that is a possibility of half a casualty on the column, which doesn't convert, so just 1 casualty on that French column. That's firing, and indeed there's no close combat, so that's the end of turn 5. Right, this time for the Prussians, much better result. So the brigade in the village has activated. We've got artillery assault off against our heavy battery in the village. And everything on the Prussian side is active. We have 2 ADCs for the French. We'll roll for our right-hand flanking attack. Yes, they are activated. And for our left-hand brigade down here, is hesitant, but it's got its re-roll. It is active. And then we'll roll for our brigade in the village. It is active too. So everyone's active this turn. And it'll be a straight die roll. I think I probably rolled 4 dice for the French last turn. I'd forgotten they'd lost their cavalry brigade, so we probably overdid it with their ADCs. But anyway, to no consequence, the Prussians have initiative. I'm sure there'll be some charges. Let's see what happens as we start the charges and moves in turn 6. Quite a lot of charges. So the Prussian brigade here has advanced into or charged into this French line. The Prussian brigade in the centre has charged into this village, and the French brigade doing the flanking attack has charged the guns. The skirmish screen, you can see there, the Prussian skirmish screen wasn't quite contacted by the French, so they remain in place. All right, let's do the charges. We'll start down here. We'll start with a defensive volley by the French second line troops here. They've only taken 1 casualty, so this will be at full effect, but it's only a 4, so that'll be no casualties on the attacking French. All right, now let's roll for the charge results. Both sides have got a support. Okay, so this charge will be at +2 for the Prussians because of their elite status. That's the only modifier, as all the units are pretty much untouched. So that's a 6 against a 5. That becomes an 8 against a 5. So the Prussians have won by 3. They take the ground, and the French will retreat with 1d3 casualties. And I think their supports will fall back too. So 2 more casualties on the French, and they retreat. Okay, so the Prussians have taken the ground. The French battalion that was not engaged stays in place, and the other 2 retire and retreat behind it. Let's do the risk to the general test. Wow, an 11. That's another falter test on this French brigade. We'll see how they do. The Prussians are really causing the French morale to waver. Okay, now we'll open up with the Prussian guns here. So they are on artillery assault, so they will get the bonus dice. They get another bonus dice because the attacking unit is in column. Reroll a 2, which will be a fatigue casualty, but we do get 2 casualties from the artillery dice. So we'll mark those up and work out the charges. Okay, so this will be a straight roll off. The French are on 7 casualties, so that'll be -1, and another -1 for taking 2 casualties in the turn, and they've attached their general, actually, so that will not be a all square. It'll be -1 to the French. Let's see how we do. Prussians roll well. They roll an 11. The French roll a double 1. So the French have lost by 6, so they retreat, and the French take 1d3 casualties, and their supports will also fall back too. We'll mark the casualties up and do so. Charging a built-up area, the Prussians will go in automatically, but the French will get their volley from the garrison. That causes 2 casualties on the Prussians, which takes that battalion up to 8. All right. Looks like a tough ask in terms of the hand-to-hand combat to get into that building, but we'll see. That's it for charges. Prussians, I believe, had initiative. So that'll be Prussian normal movement and then firing. Okay, so we've just done normal firing, and the Prussian skirmishers caused a casualty on the French there. And then this Prussian artillery battery opened up with some counter-battery fire against the French on the hill here. We've rolled a double 6, so that gets reduced by 10 because we're going against deployed artillery, but it takes them up to 2 casualties, which takes them to a total of 4, and a discipline test. They pass their discipline test, fortunately for the French, so the artillery battery remains in place. But we have got a destiny test, a 9 on the artillery battery, recovers 2 casualties. I don't think that unit, again, has taken any casualties, so there'll be no effect from that. And then the Prussian artillery battery down here has already fired, so it'll simply be finally a matter for the French skirmishers to open up against that Prussian skirmishers going against that French attacking battalion there, but we cause no casualties. So that's the end of the Prussian firing. We'll do some return fire for the French. I think the first thing to fire will be the French artillery battery. This will be at -1, and they will go against that supporting unit outside the village. See what we can do. That'll be at effective range. We roll an 8, although they are engaged in melee, so I don't think we can target them. So that'll have to be an 8, I think, against that battery in the open. That goes down to a 6 at long range. It's half a casualty, which does cause no effect. Then we move across down here, and we've got the French skirmisher screen firing at the Prussian colleagues, and they have no effect. And I think that's it. Everything else is now masked. So that's the end of firing in turn 6. Final piece of the game will be some hand-to-hand combat as the Prussians again try and capture this. Right, so perhaps not surprisingly, the Prussians have been thrown back. They'd already taken heavy casualties. They lost the combat in the village by 3. So that battalion actually has been wiped out due to the cumulative casualties from the melee and then having to retreat as well. And their supporting battalion has retired with them. But that will, I don't know whether that actually will be a fault test. Because actually I don't think the battalion was wiped out. You don't get an extra 1d3 casualties. I think they've taken 6, so they're up to 9. So I'll have to put that battalion back on the table. I think I overly zealously took it off, thinking there would be some extra casualties from the retreat, but there aren't in this case. So both those Prussian battalions fall back. So that's it. That's where we are at the end of turn 6. Let's see what transpires in turn 7. We've got a bunch of falter tests to do. Okay, so as we start turn 7, indeed I've put the Prussian unit back on. It got thrown back from the village. I probably need to move it a little bit further back because it did get a retreat result, so it probably should be behind its fellow supporting battalion. But it only had 5 casualties, so it'll be on 8 and taken no further casualties from the retreat, so would be all right there. So let's roll for ADCs, 3 for the French, and still... How many for the Prussians? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, actually there is a bonus one. So we've got 1, 2, 3 French brigades left, so they should have 4 dice, and the Prussians also have 4. All right, so the French get a bonus dice because they've rolled 2 6s. The Prussians don't. Both have got 4 ADCs. Let's see what they do. Okay, so unfortunately for the French, we've gone hesitant with this right-hand brigade, so we can't rally this retreating one. It does mean this unit has stopped right in front of the guns, which doesn't look too healthy. All right, let's do our falter tests for this retreating brigade. First test is a 4. I think that's still a retire and a 4. Let's see what they do on 2 4s, because I'm afraid, I think on 4s, for a line brigade, you may continue to retire, which will take them off table. On a 4, no, it's a rally. Brigade successfully rallies retreating units, but routed units disperse. They will go hesitant, and they must step back if they're within 9 inches of an enemy unit. All right, so we only have retreating units, not routing units, so they step back if they're within 9, and that brigade goes. Okay, so in this turn, French do have initiative, but both of their attacking brigades are hesitant. This one down here as having been attacked by the Prussians last turn, and this one also having been pushed back from the gun line. All right, so French to move first. I don't think there'll be any charges, so it'll be charges first for the Prussians. I'm sure our elite battalions down here are going to have a go at driving this French battalion off again. Okay, so we charge into the village. There'll be a defensive volley by the French garrison. Let's see what they do. They cause 1 casualty on the attacking battalion, not enough to slow them down. And there may be a ragged volley from this French column. This will be at -2 and half effect because they are unformed. An 8 for an inferior volley because they also moved this turn. Let's see what an 8 is. For an inferior volley, an 8 is 2 casualties. Halving that, that is -2 for being unformed is 1 casualty. Halving that takes that down to 0, so no effect. All right, let's do the charge results as this French column is charged by these Prussian veterans. So the Prussians have taken 5 casualties, but our veterans, the French, have taken no casualties, but are on -2 because they're unformed. The French will have unformed supports. So the French get a reroll. We can reroll this 3 at -1. It becomes a 4. That is at -1 though, because its support is unformed. So that's also that reduces to a 3. So French result remains unchanged. Prussians have got an 8. The French have got a 7. So the Prussians have won the charge by 1. They will melee with Elan, and the defenders will melee unformed. And we will also have a melee in this village. Right, that's it for charges. Let's do any normal. So the French army is really concerned it's getting chewed up piecemeal, but there doesn't feel an awful lot they can do. They do need to hang on to this village, so they're going to leave those 2 battalions holding the village. They further pivoted this artillery battery to potentially throw some fire onto this village if it falls to the Prussians, and their last 2 uncommitted battalions are now swinging to the right to reinforce this fractured line down here. These combats probably won't go well for the French. As we swing across the table, the Prussians are again manoeuvring in the centre here. Those guns are going to have a go against the French, who have deployed in line to hopefully take at least a few less casualties from the Prussian artillery fire. So it's French firing first. They can fire with that line against those deployed guns. It'll be at -4 because deployed guns are -2, I believe. I will just check that. And they obviously moved. It'll be an inferior volley because they deployed this turn. So infantry target is deployed battery, so it'll be -2 and it'll be an inferior volley. So they roll a 7 on an inferior volley. -2 is no effect. Otherwise, then their garrison will fire at the Prussian skirmishers. They will cause no casualties. This French heavy artillery battery will open fire at long range against the Prussians down here. We roll an 8. That is 1 casualty on the Prussians. And that will be it for them. And over here, everything is engaged in combat. We can fire 2 shots against the Prussian skirmishers, and we cause 1 casualty against the Prussian skirmishers. All right, that's it for French firing. We'll now fire back with the Prussian skirmishers are fired, pretty much totally ineffective. The Prussian heavy artillery will now open up. Again, going against this deployed artillery on the hill, this will be at -2. 8 at long range goes down to a 6. It's potentially half a casualty, which doesn't convert, so they remain intact. Then an important fire this turn. This will be at close range, this heavy battery going against this French line to its front. We roll an 8. That'll be reasonably effective at close range. Is 3 casualties and a discipline test. Let's roll the discipline test. We roll a 4. They will be going, I'm sure they've already taken a number of casualties. Right, let's just check that. So 8 at close range was 3 casualties. Let's just go and see what the unit had. Okay, so it only took this unit up to 5, but that's enough. So at -1, a forward converts to a 3. That's a retreat test. That'll be 2 retreating units in this brigade now, and that'll be another fault test on the French. Okay, so it looks like the Prussian guns have successfully held off this French counterattack. There's trouble with attacking with low morale units. It doesn't take too much for them to be pushed back. So, as I say, 2 retreating units in this brigade now, so they will have a falter test. Otherwise, the Prussians remain in their sort of box in the centre there, and we've got their powerful but small punch going into this part of the French line. So now let's do the hand-to-hand combat. We'll start with the battalions in the open. The Prussians have the advantage of having a LAN, and the French being unformed. The French have taken no casualties. The Prussians have taken 5. So the Prussians did not have as much of an advantage as you might have thought. But anyway, they've rolled really well. 4 casualties and none by the French. So the French lose by 4, which will not be great. So on a loss of 4, they take the ground and that French battalion will retreat. We will now also have 2 retreating battalions in that brigade. This one also will have another falter. Let's roll this one. So the French get 5 dice as they've taken no casualties. And they do pretty well. They cause 3 casualties on the Prussians. Prussians, however, get 8 dice, being elite and a far higher grade, morale grade than the French. So they cause 5 casualties on the French. So the French win by 2. So they will take the village, and another retreating unit for the French. All right, we're on turn 9 now, so the Prussian attack continues. They have captured their second village. They've got that elite battalion now ensconced in there, and their veteran here pushing against this disordered mob of French troops. They will have to take a full test. They have no less than 3 retreating units in that mob of troops there, but plenty of reserves and some artillery there, so they could have a decent chance in the long term of pushing the Prussians out of this village. On this flank, the Prussian infantry remains squarely in the centre of the table, and it's the Prussian artillery that's doing the damage. The French still hold the village, but they also have a full test on the right flank from their failed charge. So these ADC rolls are critical. Let's see how we do. All right, the French get 3 ADCs, as do the Prussians. French will have to allocate all of those to full tests, and the Prussians, let's have a look, let's see what they do. Noting that the French are going to really struggle to push the Prussians out of this, we're going to go for glory for the Prussians. Doesn't happen very often. Takes 3 ADCs, so all of them. And it doesn't go off, so they go hesitant. And the other Prussian brigade in the centre is active. All right, wish those had been the other way around. Okay, now let's go to the full tests. We're going to put 2 ADCs on this, because if we get retreat results here, we'll disappear off the table. So first one is a 5, that'll be a rally. And then the 1 ADC we've got allocated to the other brigade, we roll a 3. So on a 5, line troops obey orders, and on a 3, they retire. So this brigade on the right flank is going to retire off the table, whereas this brigade in the centre will recover and could fight on. After 9 turns, we're going to call this phase of the Battle of Lutzen complete. So the Prussians have done pretty well, actually. They early in the game, they captured this village in the centre. I think it was on the first turn of the game, actually, with their most elite infantry brigade. It's not always that those assaults without softening up go off, but they did this time, and this brigade has done really successfully. 1 battalion still remains in the village. Its light battalion is still ensconced there at the edge of the farm, and 2 further battalions have now captured this village as well and are pushing this brigade back. This French brigade is, although it has rallied, it is hesitant, and all its units are unformed. I was a bit greedy with the Prussians. I probably should have just played a normal result, and then we could have charged into the unformed units again with that battalion. But anyway, so we're hesitant with the Prussians, so there's a bit of a standoff here. French have a lot of troops here, and with all this firepower, I think they will be able to push the Prussians back out of this village, given 3 or 4 turns of firing with skirmishers with that artillery. And there's not an awful lot of infantry left on the Prussian side to hold this position. So a precarious position, but captured the second village there. On the far left, never really anything happened on that flank. French hold it securely. They kept the lancers on the other side of the bridge, and but unfortunately only piecemeal deployed in this direction and allowed the Prussian to capture that village. And over here, tragedy, the French failed their full test. They had a retreat result. Those rear 2 battalions there both fled off table. So we've got a brigade here, broken brigade. These 2 battalions retired, and this artillery battery also had to pull back off the table. And the Prussians were able just to, or would be able to just pop their skirmishers into that village and capture that village at the beginning of the next turn, and be able to move 1 of their infantry battalions probably in there, and make that too much of a task for the French to hold. So, as this game plays through, the French have been pushed out of their right-hand flank. The Prussians hold that village. They squarely hold the village in the centre. They have all their heavy artillery intact, and indeed have a Russian brigade battery off table they could bring on. The French hold this left flank. They probably will recapture this village, but at this point, the Prussians hold it, if tenuously. Let's see what happens when we play the next phase of the Battle of Lutzen. Hope you've enjoyed this game. Do remember to subscribe if you like the channel. Give us your comments. Hope you enjoy this return to our Napoleonic games, and look forward to seeing you all the next time. Cheers everyone, and have a good weekend.